Shalom. Giving all praises to Yahawah, bahasham, Yahawashi. Double honors to the apostles, bishops, and elders of Great Millstone. Salutations to you, hopefully elect. I'm your brother Yahawah from the Great Millstone, Orlando, and just in the spirit, as I was watching, or as I watched the elder Damashapat, his video going into, or his testimony going into how basically, man, just dealing with that that drinking demon. Because being in this environment where everything is working against us, which is why all the more we ought to keep our medicine strong, to quote Apostle Racha, staying in tune with the spirit as much as possible, being that these spirits, man, they're working against us. And as a sidebar, we can't take these things personal. I stopped taking it personal a long time ago when I came to the understanding, the realization, dealing with these spirits on the left hand, is that, something that I always say, they're nothing but the little brothers messing with the big brothers, Lord willing, if we're of that number. Because the scriptures talk about how we're going to have rank over these angels on the left hand, these spirits on the left hand, including Satan. Oftentimes, man, you'd be cursing Satan out, some shit happens. But like it says here, which ties into the topic of this video, in Ecclesiastes 7:14, in the day of prosperity be joyful, but in the day of adversity consider. The Most High also have set the one over against the other, to the end that man should find nothing after him. So basically, man, at the end of the day, Yahawah bahasham Yahawashi is in control of everything. So like I said, as far as taking things personal with the spiritual demon Satan and these spirits on the left hand, you don't have to, because the Lord's in control. And, Satan, he can only do what the Heavenly Father allows him. Because that does take away from the Heavenly Father's divinity, giving Satan too much credit. But like I said, Lord willing, if we're of that number, Satan, as well as all those spirits on the left hand, they're nothing but the little brothers messing with the big brothers, if we're of that number. So stop taking it personal when it comes to these spirits, man, messing with us, man. And make no mistake about it, that's why, going back to the topic, man, dealing with these demons, and again, I was inspired by watching the elder Damashapat's video, and it just sparked me, because through the spirit, again, brothers deal with certain demons, such as that alcohol demon, that alcohol demon, man. But again, it just made me, through the spirit, just meditate on one of the many demons that brothers deal with. Dealing with that financial demon, that's another major demon that we often deal with. So that's what inspired me to do this video, dealing with that financial demon. Because like I said, make no mistake about it, it is a demon. That's why we call it the financial demon. You hear brothers talk about the financial demon. You might ask, well, how is it a demon? Well, here it is. Brothers might be working 2-3 jobs, and it's just never enough. Some shit always pops up when it comes to bills or whatever the case, man. Some shit always pops up, and it just always seems like a setback, a financial setback, like Job. When you look at the circumstances of Job, again, the Heavenly Father allowed Satan, the spiritual demon Satan, to take everything from him, including his finances, his resources, his wealth. And again, looking at his circumstances, well, obviously we know that it was Satan that was given that permission. But it just goes to show you that again, because shit always pops up, and it's just unforeseen events always pop up, and it's just like, damn, you get that feeling like you can't get a break. It's always one thing after another. Well, again, that's why I read this, man, because at the end of the day, Yahawah is in control of everything. You see? So, again, man, dealing with that financial demon, which it is a demon. Now, don't confuse, because, there is a thing of mismanaging your funds and resources and things of that nature, right? But like I said, man, for the most part, brothers are honest and sincere. Brothers work. You might work 2-3 jobs, and it's just like, damn, it's never enough, man. Well, man, I'm gonna go to this in Deuteronomy, and this is why, being in the house of mourning rather than in the house of feasting, right? And this is why Apostle Paul stressed, man, being content with what we got, our daily bread, and things of that nature, But I'm gonna grab this real quick in Deuteronomy 8. Let me just get to the point. Well, I'm gonna start at Deuteronomy 8:16. Who fed thee in the wilderness with manna, which thy fathers knew not, that he might humble thee, and that he might prove thee, to do thee good at thy latter end. And again, as I read that Ecclesiastes 7, because again, the Lord is fair. He's balanced. And that is another thing when it comes to that financial demon. The Lord keeps us balanced. It's a thing of being balanced, right? And ultimately, trusting in Yahawashi, right? But as I said, or as I read in Ecclesiastes 7, sometimes the Lord gives us, more than what we're used to having. The Lord gives us a little bit extra, and sometimes, hey, we're based. And with that being said, like I said, to consider, But it says, verse 17, and thou say in thine heart, my power and the might of mine hand hath gotten me this wealth. So you see, and again, it is a part of us staying humble, remaining humble, right? And again, calling on and trusting on Yahawashi. You see, because if we were rich, so-called rich, if we had a lot of money, then there would be no need to trust Yahawashi. And you best believe Jacob be in the house of feasting. So the Lord, He humbles us, and it's a part of why we deal with financial woes. Verse 18, but thou shalt remember Yahawah thy power, for it is He that giveth thee power to get wealth, that He may establish His covenant which He sware unto thy fathers, as it is this day. So you see, all right. Again, man, Yahawashi, ultimately He's in control of it all, right? Like it tells us in Proverbs 23. Now, because I'm gonna read it in Proverbs 23:4. Labor not to be rich, cease from thine own wisdom. Wilt thou set thine eyes upon that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings; they fly away as an eagle toward heavens. So that's another thing to consider, all right, and to remember. There's one thing I remind myself every day, man. Hey, it's easy for Yahawashi to make a man rich, or poor. That's easy work to Yahawashi. Money is nothing to Yahawashi. You see, so all the times that you might have it 1 minute, and then, hey, just like that, it can be gone. Because what's a common thing you hear in this world, especially amongst our people, about chasing that bag. But like I said, labor not to be rich, because for one, this fiat currency, man, it's about to crash. All right, and at the end of the day, man, we're not even leaving, Lord willing, we're not even going on the chariots in this very flesh that we're in. So how much more when it comes to this tainted, polluted, so-called fiat, money, this fiat currency, And furthermore, when you go into it, man, it's I forgot the term for it. Dealing with this fiat currency, man. I forgot the term for it. But basically, man, when it comes to this fiat currency, it influences you, or it can influence you to make certain decisions, and a lot of times those decisions can be irrational. You can go against your best of interests. I forgot the term for it. I believe it's a salesman, if I'm not mistaken. But they even show you that on the back of the dollar bill, man. When you look at the dollar bill, you have that web. And this is why a lot of people, man, hey, for that greenback, man, they do low, something strange for a little piece of change, man, right? 1 Timothy 6:9. Matter of fact, 1 Timothy 6:6. But godliness with contentment is great gain. Yeah, because hey, matter of fact, real quick, because what comes to mind is Apostle Paul, man. Now, when you read in what is that, Acts 18 and 3, and because he was of the same craft, he abode with them and wrought, for by their occupation they were tent makers. And if my memory serves me correct, that's pretty much like one of those. It was basically an occupation that was looked down upon at that time. All right, and Apostle Paul, so that, pretty much, man. Apostle Paul, he didn't want to pretty much be seen as taking advantage of the flock. So with this occupation, it wasn't really a lot of money, and on top of that, this was a really needless to say, man, it was work. It was work. It was a lot of work. It was some grueling work. But he did it to meet his daily needs. Because again, Apostle Paul, he was on the move. So as he was traveling, man, and going from place to place, man, mind you, with the scrolls, the parchment paper, and all that stuff, that shit's not cheap. So it was a lot on Apostle Paul, man. It was a lot. And like I said, it's bad enough that this type of occupation it was already looked down upon, right? And Jake was talking shit, accusing Apostle Paul of what's the word, man? Basically stealing money, man. That's why he said this. Made certain statements like this here in it's like in 2 Corinthians 6. Second Corinthians 6. I'm gonna start at 8. By honor, in verse 7, by the word of truth, by the power of the Most High, by the armor of righteousness on the right hand and on the left, by honor and dishonor, by evil report and good report, as deceivers and yet true. Like I said, man, Apostle Paul, man, he was a honest working man. Real quick, 2 Thessalonians. And that type of occupation with Apostle Paul, man, like I said, man, it was some grueling work. And for him to still go out and do the work, man, hey, that's why I'm about to get it. But real quick, 2 Thessalonians. 2 Thessalonians 3:8. Neither did we eat any man's bread for naught, but wrought with labor and travail night and day, that we might not be chargeable to any of you. Not because we have not power, but to make ourselves an ensample unto you to follow us. So you see, all right, Apostle Paul, man, he was a hard-working man, an honest, hard-working man at that. So that no one could say that, you know, he was taking advantage of the flock. You know, because he could have, you know, but hey, to be that example, you know. Let me see what this says. So yeah, in the NLT, we never accepted food from anyone without paying for it. We worked hard day and night, so we would not be a burden to any of you. So you see, all right, that's what it meant when it says that we may not be chargeable to any of you. You see, Apostle Paul didn't want to be a burden, so hey, you know, he worked for his daily bread. He worked for what he needed. You know, so going back to that 2 Corinthians 6. And 9, as unknown and yet well known, as dying, and behold, we live. Because yeah, man, like I said, and as I read, you know, Apostle Paul, and you know, we feel that today, man. You know, because even now, man, as it gets harder to do videos, man, it's just hard. It's just getting harder to keep up, man. You know, we're in these weak bodies. They're slowing down. You know, brothers are through. You know, but it's a spirit that revives us and you know, quickens us. You know, it says, as chastened and not killed, as sorrowful yet always rejoicing. Brothers are constantly, you know, sighing in the spirit. You know, but again, that lively hope. You know, because really have to have a fuck it attitude, fuck it and faith attitude in this truth. You know, and you just really have to walk as if Yahawashi is dealing with us. You know, and of course you got to believe that for yourself. It says, as poor, yet making many rich. So you see, it says, as having nothing, and yet possessing all things. Because at the end of the day, hey, this truth, this truth is what makes us rich, man. You know, we have everything. And one thing I've just been extremely grateful for lately is, hey man, real talk, I'm not wanting, I'm not without. And whatever I don't have, hey, it's coming. You know? So there's really nothing to complain about. You know, Tawadi Yahawashi, there's really nothing to complain about, man. You know, Yahawashi, he's giving us what we need every single day. And you see, and that goes back to the whole point. You know, our daily bread. Right? You know, daily bread, man. Because again, you know, Yahawashi, he knows what he's doing at the end of the day. That's why we ought to just trust the process. That's why we just trust the process. Yahawashi, he knows what he's doing. And if you're in the spirit, then hey, like I said, man, you just learn to be content, man. Because even though one of those main demons that, again, we deal with, that financial demon, man. You know, brothers deal with that. Brothers are all too familiar with that financial demon. You know, but does not Yahawashi always make a way? Somehow, some way. Somehow, some way, Yahawashi always makes a way, man. And it's just like, man. So, of course, it's a process. You know. But hey, Yahawashi, he knows what we need, man. He knows what's going on. And that's why, like the scriptures talk about, not worrying about tomorrow and focusing on what's sufficient for today. You know, here it is, you're worrying about tomorrow and you're still in today, man. We're still in today. You know, So it all boils back to faith at the end of the day. It all boils back to faith. You see, because again, well, I was going to grab this now, 1 Timothy, back in 1 Timothy 6. Again, verse 6, but godliness with contentment is great gain. So you see, just showing appreciation, man. Like I said, man, and the Lord loves that. He loves a grateful, that grateful spirit, that grateful attitude. Yahawashi, He loves that. It says, for we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. So like I said, we're not even going in the chair with this very flesh. So how much when it comes to this fiat currency, this fake money that everyone's chasing so much. You see, it says, and having good salakia, and having food and raiment, let us be therewith content. Amen. The simplicity in Yahawashi, man. It's been my thing for a long time, man. Hey, at this point, well, I've gotten to a point where, and it's easier said than done, because I'm right here, and I'm not in the kingdom yet. But when it comes to the kingdom, I just want to see Yahawashi, man. I just want to see Yahawashi sit on the throne. And I always say, in the kingdom, although I'll have a new body, but just give me a shade up under a tree, man, and some wine, maybe a few eyes, and I'll be good, man. I just want to see Yahawashi get his. Because, we just learn to appreciate the little things. And that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. Just being content. Just being grateful. Just appreciating the little things. Because does not Yahawah always do it? Like I said, the Lord always does it. Somehow, some way, Yahawah always makes it work. It says, verse 9, but they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. So you see, and this is what would happen if the Lord gave us a lot of money. Now, don't get me wrong. Certain brothers are in, better positions as far as, financially than others. But, and that's the balance of it. That is the balance of it. Because they'll hopefully elect brothers. Because, you've had accounts where Jake in the truth has come across a lot of money, and then they end up bugging them out. And further show you that, hey, it's a demon, man. That financial demon. Apostle Tahar gave his testimony years ago, and he talks about it from time to time about the one dude going back to the old One West school, man. He straight up told them, Apostle Tahar talks about this, how this dude, I don't remember his name, but the dude straight up told him that, hey, he's tired of being broke. He ended up falling out of the truth because he specifically said something along the lines of, hey, he's tired of being broke. So you see, man, it's all about testing our faith, man. The Lord wants to see where we're at. So for the most part, man, hey, this is why it's like this. And again, it makes us distrust in Yahawashi, right? But like I said, man, they that be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts. So you see, man, and we see the accounts, right? We see what's going on. P. Diddy's in them, get too much money, hey, and then what? you see what happens. You see what happens, man. You get tempted, right? And again, like I said, if you so-called rich, you hit the lottery or whatever, man, hey, Jigga end up falling out the truth, man. There will be no need to trust Yahawashi. You're good. Your mind is, hey, I'm in the kingdom. I'm good. If you had a lot of money, man, if you were so-called rich, you wouldn't need Yahawashi. So all going back to, again, being in the house of mourning. You know, Yahawah is constantly keeping us on our toes. You know. First Corinthians 4. You know, Jake, man, hey, I speak for us all, man. Jake is tired of being broke, you know. But hey, First Corinthians 4. Verse 11. Even unto this present hour we both hunger and thirst, and are naked, and are buffeted, and have no certain dwelling place. In labor, working with our own hands, being reviled, we bless. Being persecuted, we suffer it. So you see, this is why a part of why Apostle Paul wrote these things. All right, you know, dealing with these financial woes, man. You know, and again, out of for sake of not taking advantage of the flock, and to not be a burden. Hey, Apostle Paul, hey, he worked for his daily bread, man. And it was some gruesome work, but to still go out there and teach. And you know, we feel that, like I said, man, we feel that effect. We feel those effects today. You know, a lot of times brothers be getting straight off a 10-hour shift to go to camp, to go back to work, and then the next morning, man. Hey, I mean, let's be real. It's tough. It's hard. Like I said, it is getting harder to do videos, but hey, that's why we are the sacrifice pursuant to Romans 12. It is a sacrifice. You know, and that's why, you know, hey, our sacrifice is not going to go. It's not going to be in vain. So, you know, we just got to hold on. You know. But nevertheless, man, hey, how about Yahawashi? He's in control. You know, Proverbs 22. Proverbs 22 and 2. The rich and poor meet together. The Lord is the maker over them all. So you see, again, giving too much Satan the credit, cursing Satan out all the time. No, you know, hey, Yahawashi, he's in control. And like I said, what comforts me is knowing that, hey, man, just like that, Yahawashi, he could change our situation. You know, he could change our situation. So consider, as I read in Ecclesiastes 7, consider. You see, just consider him. Yahawashi, he's in control. And you best believe, man, Yahawashi, he's just not going to leave his elect just begging for bread, man. He's just not going to leave us out there like that. So, again, consider. Yahawashi, man, he knows what's going on. He knows what we're going through. So, again, it's just all a thing of just trusting Yahawashi, leaning on Yahawashi for everything. You know, the Lord got our back, man. You know, and this has definitely been one of those therapeutic videos, man. You know, as we're all going through it. and it's beautiful, you know, dealing with Apostle Paul. And I've really been just meditating on Acts, being that we're in the time of Acts all over again, and how the disciples and the multitude, right? During the time of the Acts, when you read certain accounts in the Acts, the book of Acts, man, and how, you know, Jake was really relying on one another. You know, as I did the video yesterday, going into how more is going to be added to the sanctuaries, more is going to be added to the church. You know, more and more we're going to lean on each other more and more. You know, and that's already taking place behind the scenes. You know, certain things you try to do in the world with, you know, people in the world, your family, whatever, it doesn't come through. But you know, when you come together with brothers, man, and you know, put those thinking caps together and whatnot, hey, shit happens, man. And it's just a small sign. It's a small prelude to what we're going to start seeing as we continue to progress on. You know, we're definitely going to lean on each other more. You know, but Lord willing, this was edifying. All praises to Yahawah. Shalom to you, hopefully, like.